Hello and welcome again to Understanding Transitional Justice in this second segment. And I see that I've designed the slides so that the titles of the segments are obscured by the little image in the corner of me talking. So sorry about that. You have it in the title. In the second segment, what I want to concentrate on is dynamics of communication between institutions engaged in post-conflict justice processes and the public. That is, we made reference in the first segment to the often systematic exclusion of the public from processes engaged with public memory. The question that we need to raise in talking about these processes is who participates in post-conflict justice activity. What we see in a lot of instances, and this is what Chris Lamont and Hannah Panwitz concentrate on in the article that I asked you to look at for this week, is that very often you see a discourse that is defined to particular members of the elite, especially to legal professionals, to political actors at a high level, to the exclusion of popular participation that is going to also include, in a large measure, the participation of victims. So what are the consequences of the exclusion of discourse to members of an elite? Say one of the consequences is probably to highlight a basic contradiction between the identity, between the orientation, between the goals of the agents of the process and the position of the intended beneficiaries of the process. And how is this played out? This is played out through a narrow focus on particular processes and on particular institutions, especially through a narrow focus on law. And the focus on law often functions to the exclusion of other issues, including socioeconomic conflicts and socioeconomic inequality. And this is a set of factors that very often stands as one of the principal causes of the violence that took place, that the goal of the post-conflict justice initiative is to address. So these are factors that have to do with issues that are contentious in every social environment and are more contentious in unstable social environments or in social environments where a new order of power is being consolidated. They're factors having to do with the distribution of benefits deriving from the state among different regions and among different groups, whether these are class groups or ethnic groups or groups of another type. And they're issues that have to do with, particularly during periods when new democratic states are being established and consolidated, that have to do with the structure of participation in and the degree of marginalization from democracy. So let's talk a bit about elites and what elites do. Here is the perception on the ground of what elites do. Elite-led action is going to appear to be action, clearly. And what sort of action will it be? Well, enough action so that it appears to be action. That is, enough action to give the appearance of engagement. And this is the reason why very often, whether you're talking about commissions or other factors, the scope and extent of post-conflict justice initiatives very frequently represent a compromise. It is what the members of the elite are willing to do, or what different sectors of the elite are able to agree on, rather than a representation of the needs and desires of the public and of victims. Second, these elites, because they are elites, are often engaged in an effort to limit the extent of political change that will derive from the results of any initiative. Okay, that is to concentrate it on, in particular, perpetrators of violence rather than on structural factors contributing to violence or structural factors that might be a cause of violence. And what this means is that the dialogue is limited. What happens when the dialogue is limited? Then we talk about a narrowed scope for post-conflict initiatives. The narrowing of the scope is designed to concentrate attention and to concentrate blame on a particular group of perpetrators that is relatively small and that is likely to be in some crucial ways unrepresentative of the system under which violence and violations took place. So that is, by concentrating attention on a particular group of perpetrators, attention is directed away from systematic abuse and from the extent to which abuse derives from the character of the political or economic system, or of the inequalities in the society where violations took place. Now, again, Lamont and Panwitz illustrate this by using the example of post-regime justice in Tunisia after the change of regime there in the last couple of decades. What they have noticed is that activity tends to be concentrated in the hands of a relatively small group that is comprised by legal professionals, politicians, some activists who are especially concerned with human rights. And as indicated in the second part here, I've given you a quotation from their article. The concentration of activity in the hands of representatives of these groups means that other groups are excluded, and in particular, the marginalized communities whose activity contributed to political change, to the demise of the old regime and the establishment of the new one, and whose expectations lie at the core of the establishment of the post-regime justice process. So there is an overarching tendency then, once these processes take place, to continue narrowing the scope, to prosecute in the event that this is a legally dominated process for very clear human rights abuses, for incidents of violence, but to protect people from prosecution and to protect the system from making reparations or other compensation for economic abuses, for systematic forms of inequality. So if we want to pull this all together, what does this mean? It means, look, what I've offered is a critique of elite-led processes and an argument that elite-led processes will tend to have a narrow scope that focuses only on violence and on some effects of violence, but not on causes of violence. In general, we can draw a larger point out of this, and that is that addressing the question of who is able to participate in post-conflict and post-regime justice activity can tell you a lot about the scope and the character of the activity that will be carried out as a part of the initiative.